Hello students and welcome to the automobile engine class. Myself Shankhu Ghosh, assistant professor of automobile engineering department at Dr. Sudhi Chandra Sur Degree Engineering College under the JIS group. So students, here in the previous classes we already complete the three modules. First module, which where we already discussed about the engine principles and the fundamentals. Then in second module we already discussed about the constructional features, functions and the working of the automobile engine components. And last of this three module, third module and last the third module where we discuss about the engine cooling system. Now students, in this module, that means in the fourth module, we discuss here about the engine lubrication system. Before the starting this system, I I just inform you about the objective and the outcomes from this subject. So objective of this topic, that is students can easily understand about the lubrication system and their purposes. They are they also understand about the various property and the functions of the lubricating oil and different methods of the lubrication. And besides that, they can also understand about the various types of lubrication methods. And the outcomes of the subjects, students can easily understand the requirement of this engine cooling system, engine lubrication system, as well as they can understand or they can easily identify the component which is used for the lubrication system and how they identify the property of the lubricant. So these are the basic outcomes and the objectives of objective and the outcomes of this topic, that is the engine that cover the engine lubrication system. So students, let's start the class on the basis of the lubrication system. Let's start with the introduction section here. The lubrication is a process or it's a technique of using a lubricant to reduce the friction, to reduce the friction and wear than tear in a contact in between two surfaces. The lubrication is basically a or a technique process or a technique of using a lubrication sorry using a lubricant to reduce the friction and the wear and tear in a contact in between the two surfaces. Here the study of lubrication is a discipline in a field of tribology. So students, basically the lubrication system, so this lubrication system supply the oil to the frictional part of the engine, rotating and the sliding components. An oil film is then found. An oil film is formed to prevent the metal parts from coming into the direct contact with one another. The oil film between the parts allow them to move easily with the less friction. The lower internal friction of an engine, makes it to run freely, which results in more power developed by the engine. Thus, the engine lubrication system has the following main function was that they can easily understand that 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 the why we use basically this lubrication, because as already told here, to prevent, that is that is that we want to prevent the wear and tear in between the two surface when they have come in contact with one another, with the other surface with directly contact. So that's why that at that time a oil film is formed. At that time a oil film is formed to prevent this wear and tear in between the metal of the two different to the different parts when they are contacting each with other. So this lubricants, so for that reason the lubricants can be various types. It can be solids, it can be liquid, or it can be liquid to liquid dispersion or the gases. When we are talking about the liquid lubricants, it means we are talking about the molybdenum disulfide, and the and its chemical formula is MOS2, or solid to liquid dispersion. Solid to liquid means this looks like a grease. Then oil, liquid means oil or water, and liquid to liquid dispersion or gases. So in this way we can be used as lubricant to reduce the friction and wear and tear in between the contact of two surfaces. So the fluid lubricated system are designed so that the applied product, the applied load is partly and completely carried by the hydrodynamic and hydrostatic pressures, and this basically reduces the solid body interaction, and it's depending on the degree of a surface which is separation, and different lubrication regimes can be distinguished and distinguished. So these are the basic introduction of the introduction. Now coming to the purpose of the introduction. Sorry, purpose of this lubrication system. Basically, the lubrication system is used to reduce the friction between the moving parts. Means basically it helps to reduce the friction. Basically, it helps to reduce the friction in between the two moving parts of the engine by preventing the metal to metal contact, preventing the by metal to metal contact in between them, and thereby it reduces and thereby it reduces the power loss, due to the friction. Second is, it helps to increase the efficiency as the friction has been reduces, so that the frictioning loss or heat generated due to the has been negligible. So as the friction loss or the heat is generated by the heat is created due to the friction which is negligible, so that loss or that power must be added as an mechanical efficiency, and which helps introduce the engine powers. So that's why it obviously increase the efficiency. to minimize the vibration. If the friction is generated, so after that friction is created, some metal within some metals wear and tear has been observed, and when the wear and tear has been seen in this in between the engine components, and that time some vibration has been created between the engine. So that's why it if we use this lubrication system, so it obviously helps to minimize the vibration. It helps to reduce the corrosion and the carbon deposit. To reduce the corrosion and carbon deposit, and sorry, and to beside that, it also helps to reduce the heat of the moving part, minimize the power loss due to the friction. It helps to reduce the noise which is created by the parts, and also it helps to provide the cooling onto the engine. So students, these are the basic or needed or purposes of this lubrication system of the engine block. Now here is the parts which is required, or which is needed to the lubrication system. So for the lubricant purposes, we the most important parts covered by the cylinder, piston and the piston ring. Second is the main bearing, crankshaft, crank pin and the piston pin, big end and the small end connecting rod, camshaft, valves and the timing gear. Then in between the cylinder, the pistons reciprocating movements are occur. So to maintain the reciprocating movement of the piston smoothly inside the cylinder, so we need some lubrication system added there. That's why the cylinder, piston and the piston ring is a part of an part to be the lubricant. Next is when the piston moves ups and downs, that after the power is generated, the power is transferred to the crankshaft with the power is transferred to the crankshaft with the help of the connecting rod, and this connecting rod is connected with the piston pin and and connection is connected with the crankshaft with the crank pin. So here some main bearing is also attached. So that's why the big end or small end of the connecting rod, as well as the crankshaft and the main bearing and crank pin and piston pin is also the part of the lubricant. Then camshaft, valves and timing gear. As the valves are needs to open and close to provide the airflow in and exhaust gases out. So that's why we need to open and control the opening and closing of the valves. So and these valves are basically operated are totally controlled with the help of by the control by the camshaft. So that's why this camshaft and the valves is also need to be lubricated. So these are the basic components which is required, which is the part which need to So what used for the lubricants. Here is the pictures of that. So from this picture, it is clear that the which parts are needs to be lubricant. So here you can see in this picture, this picture of the lubrication system. This one is called the oil sump, which one is placed at the lower portion of the engine. Which one is placed at the lower portions of the engine. Then on the oil pump, the engine body has been placed, and the engine head has been placed on the engine body. So these are the basic structure of the engine. That is what we already studied earlier. So after in this oil sump, some pump strainer has been available in between this oil sump, and this strainer sucks this oil which is placed in this oil pump, and then it passes to this oil or lubrication oil to the oil filter. So here is the oil filter which is fitted at the outside of this filter, just outside of this uh, engine block. And here after filter it goes to the oil pump, and when an oil is pumped to the oil pump, it forces to passes to the various portions. Here as you can see in these pictures, this one is called the valve rocker. So in this place, so this one is the positions from where the fuel is reach up to this marks the valve rocker arm, then push rod. Here is the in between the cylinder, it passes from to the cylinder also. Tappet here, camshaft zone, then camshaft bearing, crankshaft connecting rod bearing, big end bearing. Here also this one is the crankshaft drilling. This is the main oil gallery. Here is the feed to the main bearing. So in this way, in up to the all the components which is are rotating or rotating movement or the reciprocating movements are available in this engine components are has need to be lubricants. So for here is the picture of this lubrication system. Now students, start the discussion of the new topic, subtopic, that is the function of the lubricating system. So here, first of all, to minimize the friction and the wear purposes, we use the lubrication system. So when two parts are coming in contact to each other, that time due to the friction some wear and some wear has been generated. To minimize these types of friction and the wear, we use this lubrication system. Next one is to cool by the carrying away the heat. When the power is during the power stroke, the power is huge amount of power is generated in the combustion chamber of the in the engine. So some amount of power has been cooled. Some amount of power which is converted into the heat has been cooled with the help of this lubrication system. Next, to seal the piston and thus preventing the escape to gases in the cylinder with consequent loss of power. To seal the piston and thus preventing the escape of gas in the cylinder, the consequent loss of power. So as a huge amount of power has been generated just on the piston head, so that time the head during the compression or after complete the suction, the amount of air is generated. So when it is the piston is in compressed position, then that time the this gases or the mixture are try to escape from the piston clearance gap. So that for that and that area, the lubrication system are held to seal this portion, and they are preventing the escape of the gases from that zone. As the escape of gas from as the preventing the escapation of this gas from the that portion, so in this way they can also help to maintain the power which is generated in the engine. So in that case also lubrication is helpful. Next is the to cushion the part against the vibration and the impact. To cushion the part against the vibration and impact. Impact. And at least is that it helps to clean the part, it lubricates them and carrying them the impurity in the impurity, and after carrying it, it's stored into the oil sump or oil pan. So these are the basics function of a lubrication system. Now coming to the next slide. Here this next slide is basically cover the lubricants oil property. Basically the lubricants oil property, which is, so these are these so this lubricant properties is takes an important role to make a liquid or any kinds of oil as an lubricant. So that for that purpose we need to follow or maintain these properties for an lubrication oil. First one is the viscosity, which is the most important, which is the most important property of the lubrication oil. It is defined as the resistance of the lubricating oil to flow or the shear. A lubricating oil can considered as a series of parallel layer which is moving on above the other. So any of the two layer, any of two layers will come with a different velocity, top layer, and moves faster than the next lower layer. And layer due to the viscous drag. The viscous drag. Next is flash point or the fire point. The lowest temperature at which the oil is flashes and fire is called as the flash and the fire point. So these two temperature must be sufficient. These two temperature must be sufficiently high for any lubricating oil to avoid the flash or burn during the uses. Next one is cloud point. The lowest temperature at which the lubricant changes from liquid state to a plastic or solid state is called cloud point. So basically at low temperature at a low in which at low temperature, when the lubrication is totally changed, where the lubrication is totally changed from the liquid state to a plastic or liquid state to a solid state, then the temperature is called as a cloud point. Then next is carbon residue. Carbon residue means the lubricating oil being the chemical compound, the lubricating oil being the chemical compound of carbon and the hydrogen. When the deposit, when burn the deposit carbon on the engine parts, so this should be as low as possible for the lubricating oil. So basically the lubricating oil being the chemical component, lubricating oil being the chemical component of the carbon and the hydrogen. So basically when it burn and it deposit the carbon, when it burn and deposit the carbon on the engine parts, and this should be as low as possible for the lubricating oil. Next is corrosion. So a lubricant should be corrode with the a lubricant should not corrode the working part. So the lubrication oil must be the corrosion free or anti-corrosion property must be there. Next is pour point. The lowest temperature, the lowest temperature at which the oil pours is called its pour point. Below this temperature, the oil becomes plastic, so it does not produce hydrodynamic lubrication, and therefore it cannot be used below this temperature. The lowest temperature at which the oil poured is called, at the lowest temperature the oil is poured, which is called as a pour point. Below this temperature the oil becomes plastic, so it doesn't it does not produce hydrodynamic lubrication, and therefore it cannot be used below this temperature. Next is properties that is called the color. This test is not so important. This test is not so important except the checking the uniformity of any grade of oil. Next is the dilution and crankcase oil. The petrol vapor may escape past the piston ring during the compression stroke, which makes the oil and affects its lubricating property. And the test which determines the amount of dilution in crankcase oil indicates the suitability of the searching oil. Next is emulsification. A lubricant when mixed with the water, and it tends to separate. When it mixed with the water, it tends to separate. The emulsification number is an index of the tendency of any oil to emulsify with the water. Next is oxidation at high temperature. Lubricating oil may breaks down at high temperature due to oxidation procedure. the oxidation which is producing hard which carbon and varnishing which deposit on the engine parts. Therefore, the lubricants must resist the oxidant. Evaporation. Evaporation test is conducted to find the quantity of oil that may evaporate. Find the quantity of oil that can be evaporate at a high temperature. Next is the sulfur content. The sulfur in a corrosive form is detrimental in the lubricating oil. Last one is the specific gravity. The specific gravity of lubricating oil varies considerably, and hence it should not be regarded as the main indication of its lubricating property. So students, these are the basic lubrication properties is required for the engine lubrication system. So students, here in this class we already discussed about the lubrication, why it is required, the function of its lubrication, and the various properties of this lubricating oil. And we also study about the parts which is need to be lubricated. From the next class we discussed. In the next class we will discuss about the classification and of the lubrication and their makes and grading and rating of the lubrication. So still then, stay at home and stay safe. Thank you so much students. Thank you so much.